KTRS Doug McKelvin along with Kelly Jackson and the rest of the crew guiding you through this Thursday. We were just talking off air. My son has an interest in computers like all other teenage boys seem to have.
And girls.
And girls as well. Yep, not to be undone because we were just talking with Alexis about this, and she's got the next big thing when it comes to an app. It's just a matter of coming up with the money to do it. And as I told my son, I said, if you come up with something, great. Make sure it works. Make sure it's a viable app. Sell it, and then remember your parents fondly. That's what I want you to do. To that end, Rand Fishkin joins us. He's the co-founder and former CEO of Moz. His new book is called Lost and Found, a painfully honest field guide to the startup world. Rand, welcome to KTRS.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Doug and Kelly.
This is not exactly the easiest thing in the world. It's not like you just sit down and slam out a couple of lines of code. It sounds to me like it's a kind of a precarious trail, starting with coming up with an idea that nobody else has come up with, or a variation on a theme that is inventing the new mousetrap, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, starting a company of any kind, right, in technology or in any other space, is a huge challenge. You need to figure out why you're valuable, why you're unique, how you can stand out, how you can acquire customers. There's a lot of pitfalls in there, and I mean that's what Lost and Founder is for, right? To try and it's the literary equivalent of let's sit down and have a beer or a coffee, and let me walk you through all these experiences that you might encounter as you do that.
Well, you ended up in an interesting situation because your company Moz, you once turned down $25 million.
Yeah. I wrote about that in the book. Yep, I regret that a lot, actually. I think that was a mistake, as many people might imagine. So here's the weird part, right? You might say, "Oh, Rand turned down a $25 million offer for the company." It actually would have been much more than that because the company that was acquiring us was using a lot of stock, and that company, HubSpot, ended up going public, which meant that stock would have been worth many multiples of what it was. So I try not to do the math, but it might have been a $60 or $70 million acquisition, and one of the weird things about that is today Moz is doing $50 million in revenue, and you might say, wait a minute, doesn't that mean that it's worth many multiples of what it was, and that you'll make more out of that? And as I describe in the book through a bunch of the financial mechanics of how these companies work, probably not. That was likely the best offer and opportunity. And it is from a pure money standpoint, both for myself and for our employees. And so I think there's been kicking myself for a good decade on that one.
But you know what? At the same time, you mentioned in August of 2016, and the CEO had to stand on stage in front of the company employees at Moz and say that you're going to have to lay off 59 of 210 full-time employees, shut down a couple of fledgling products, and cease pursuit of the strategy you'd followed. So it's not all peaches and cream. There's a lot of ups and downs in the industry.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, so many people have written to me and emailed me, and, they say, oh yeah, I was listening to that part about the layoffs, or I was listening to that section about the depression via the audiobook, and, I was crying in my car. I was crying on the airplane as I was reading this. And I think that's because this is it's an entrepreneurial journey, but I think what we don't talk about, especially in the U.S., is that it's also a very emotional journey. That founders get very attached to their companies, and leadership folks too. And this is something that I think you have to prepare for mentally. That this will not just be business, right? That this is life in all its aspects.
Isn't it true though that the internet, everybody thinks this is they're all going to be the next Bill Gates. They're all going to be the next Moz. They're all going to, when in reality, there's got to be tens of thousands of people in the United States alone who have the next best idea. And with that many people clamoring for attention, how do you manage to, get to the top of the heap and make somebody listen to you who would be able to invest the monies that would allow you to move forward on your project?
Yeah, well, two things I'd say about that. One is you're absolutely right. There are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of new companies formed every year in the United States, and the failure rate, well, in the tech startup world, it is above 80%, and so that's pretty scary. What's interesting is that in the small business world, right, that outside of tech, in, for example, a consulting or services business, it's more like 50%. So your odds are a lot better if you're not doing a tech startup, and yet many of us, chase this gold rush regardless. The other thing I'd say is that if you can find a way to build a business or to start building your business without requiring investment, right? Telling your daughter that she should, hey, can you, work your full-time job and do this on nights and weekends, right? Build this project until you have something to show, until you've got a little bit of income coming in, until you've found a way to attract customers and build a little bit of a community around what you're doing. And then, then quit your job and think about how do I get to profitability rather than how do I raise money. I think that's one of the problems that Silicon Valley startup culture has biased us towards, this idea that you have to raise money. You don't.
The book is called Lost and Founder, a painfully honest field guide to the startup world. Sounds like a great primer, frankly, to those who are interested in starting their own company or creating an app or whatever when it comes to the world of computers. Rand Fishkin is the author. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care.